The river roared like a beast unchained, its waters churning black under the storm-lashed sky. Rain hammered the earth in relentless sheets, turning the banks into a slick mire of mud and shattered branches. Thunder cracked overhead, illuminating the jagged rocks that clawed at the current, and in that fleeting light, a figure stumbled along the edge. A woman, her cloak sodden and clinging like a second skin, her boots sinking into the softened ground with every desperate step. Elara didn't know why she had come here, to this forsaken stretch of the Whispering River, where the old tales spoke of spirits that dragged the unwary into the depths. The village elders had warned her away, their eyes narrowing with that mix of pity and suspicion they reserved for her kind, the outcast healer, the one who whispered to the winds and mended wounds no blade could explain. But the pull had been too strong, an ache in her chest, like a half-remembered dream, drawing her out into the night as the storm broke. She paused, breath ragged, wiping rain from her eyes. That's when she heard it, not the thunder, but a faint, pitiful yipping, carried on the wind like a cry from the underworld. Her heart clenched. Pups. Wolf pups by the sound, their voices high and frantic, battling the roar of the flood. Without a thought, Elara scrambled down the embankment, her fingers digging into wet roots for purchase. The river had swollen beyond its banks, swallowing the forest's edge in a frothing maw. There, tangled in a snare of driftwood and vines midway across a narrow bend, 3 small forms thrashed against the current. Fur matted and dark, eyes wide with terror, they were no larger than her forearms. Wolf pups, orphaned by the storm or worse, their mother's scent long washed away. "Hold on," she murmured, her voice lost to the gale. The water was ice cold as it splashed her legs, numbing her skin, but she waded in deeper, the current tugging at her like greedy hands. One pup broke free first, a scrappy grey thing with a white blaze on its muzzle, paddling wildly toward her. She scooped it up, its body trembling against her chest, tiny claws pricking her through the cloak. The second was harder, wedged under a branch that bobbed like a cruel trap. Elara lunged, her arms straining as the river tried to claim her footing. Pain shot through her shoulder as she wrenched the wood aside, freeing the pup, a sleek black one, its ribs sharp under sodden fur. It yelped as she lifted it, nipping at her hand in fear, but she held firm, whispering nonsense words of calm, the kind her grandmother had taught her for frightened beasts. The third was slipping away. The smallest, with fur the color of storm clouds, it had been swept downstream, caught against a boulder that the water battered mercilessly. Elara's pulse thundered in her ears. She couldn't leave it. Not like this. Forcing her legs forward, she fought the pull, the river rising to her waist now, then her chest. Her cloak dragged like an anchor, but she reached, fingers brushing wet fur just as the pup's head dipped under. "Got you." She hauled it free, coughing as water filled her lungs. The 3 bundles now clutched against her in a sodden armful. They whimpered, warm despite the chill, their small hearts beating a frantic rhythm against her. Elara turned back, the bank seeming miles away, but she pushed on, each step a battle, until her knees hit solid earth. Collapsing onto the mud, she cradled them close, shielding their shivering forms from the downpour. "You're safe now," she breathed, though her own body shook with exhaustion. The pups nuzzled her, instinctive trust in their eyes, and for a moment the storm faded, leaving only the quiet bond of survival. But the forest was never truly silent. A low growl rumbled from the shadows beyond the tree line, deep and resonant, vibrating through the ground like the earth's own warning. Elara froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the dagger at her belt, a simple thing, more herb knife than weapon. The rain masked the approach, but she felt it. Eyes on her, not the hungry gaze of a predator, but something ancient, weighing her soul. From the underbrush emerged a shape that stole her breath. Towering, broad-shouldered, cloaked in shadows that seemed to writhe like living smoke. No, it was a he. She knew that much from the commanding stance, stepped into the dim light of a lightning flash. Fur? No, not fully. A man, but marked by the wild. Eyes glowing amber like embers in the night, hair dark and tangled with leaves, his bare chest scarred with claw marks that told stories of battles long past. Around his neck hung a pendant of bone and silver, etched with runes that hummed faintly, even to her untrained eyes. He was no ordinary wanderer. The air thickened with his presence, carrying the scent of pine and blood, of pack and power. The Alpha. The word bloomed in her mind unbidden, from the half-forgotten legends her grandmother spun by the fire. Kings of the wild, shifters who walked between man and beast, guardians of the hidden clans. The pups in her arms stirred, their whimpers turning to eager whines as they scented him. One, the grey one, wriggled free and tumbled toward his feet, tail wagging despite the storm. He knelt slowly, his massive hand gentle as he gathered it up, but his gaze never left Elara. It pierced her, not with threat, but with an intensity that made her skin prickle, as if he saw the secrets she buried deep. "You," he said, voice rough as gravel, laced with an accent from the northern wilds. "You pulled them from the river's jaws." It wasn't a question. Elara rose unsteadily. The other two pups still clutched to her. Rain streamed down her face, mingling with the mud. They were drowning. Anyone would... "No!" He cut her off, standing now, the pup cradled like a treasure against his chest, towering over her, yet there was no menace, only a fierce protectiveness that made the air hum. "Not anyone. The river claims what it wants. You defied it. For them." She swallowed, meeting those amber eyes. In them she saw the storm's fury reflected, but also something softer. Gratitude, perhaps, or the stirrings of a debt unpaid. The other pups yipped, straining toward him, and he took them one by one, his touch careful, reverent. But as the last was settled in the crook of his arm, he didn't turn away. Instead he lingered, the rain forging a veil between them, thick with unspoken words. "I'm Thorn," he said finally, the name like a rumble of thunder. "Alpha of the Silver Fang. These are my kin's young, their mother." The flood took her. Elara's throat tightened. Loss, raw and fresh, echoed in his tone. She nodded, unsure what to say, her healer's instincts urging her to offer comfort, but the wild in him warned her back. I'm Elara, from the village downstream. I couldn't just leave them." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, fierce and fleeting. "Then you have my pack's thanks, and more." He glanced at the darkening sky, the storm easing to a drizzle. "The river's wrath isn't sated yet. Come, my camp is near. You'll not face the night alone." It was command wrapped in invitation, and though every instinct screamed to flee this man-beast from the tales, Elara felt the pull again, that ache, now sharper, drawing her toward the unknown. The pups were safe, but something in her had shifted, cracked open by the current's cold kiss. As she followed him into the shadowed woods, the forest whispering secrets around them, she wondered if she'd saved more than lives that night. The path wound through ancient oaks, their branches like skeletal fingers overhead, dripping with the last of the rain. Thorn moved with predatory grace, the pups content in his hold, but he glanced back often, ensuring she kept pace. The air grew thicker, scented with damp earth and the faint musk of hidden dens. Elara's mind raced. Why her? Why now? The village shunned the old ways, calling them curses, but here in the wild's embrace they felt like home. A low howl echoed from afar, answered by others, a chorus that raised the hairs on her neck. Pack, calling their king home. And with him, her. The mist clung to the underbrush like a shroud, weaving through the gnarled roots that snaked across the forest floor. Elara's boots sank into the loamy earth with each step, the chill seeping through her soaked clothes, But she pressed on, the weight of Thorn's gaze pulling her forward as much as the distant howls. The pups had quieted in his arms, their small bodies rising and falling in exhausted rhythm. But the forest thrummed with life, unseen eyes watching from the gloom, breaths held in the shadows. Thorn led without a word, his silhouette cutting through the dim like a blade forged from night itself. Up close, the scars on his chest gleamed faintly under the sporadic moonlight, each one a map of survival. Jagged lines from fangs, puckered burns that spoke of fire's betrayal. He was no mere man. That much was clear now, the way the trees seemed to lean toward him, the subtle shift in his posture, as if the wild itself bent to his will. Elara's fingers tightened around the hilt of her dagger, a habit born of village whispers, tales of shifters who lured the unwary into their lairs, only to claim them under the full moon's curse. Yet there was no malice in his stride, only a quiet vigilance. When a low branch snagged her cloak, he paused, reaching back to free it with a touch that was surprisingly gentle, his calloused fingers brushing her shoulder. The contact sent a spark through her, warm against the cold, and she pulled away too quickly, heat rising in her cheeks. "Why bring me here?" she asked, her voice barely above the drip of water from the leaves. "Your pack. They won't welcome a stranger." He glanced over his shoulder, amber eyes catching the light like polished stones. "Stranger, you hold the scent of the river on you, and the lives of my kin. That's no stranger's mark." His words hung heavy, laced with that northern rumble, stirring something deep in her chest, an echo of her grandmother's stories, of bonds forged in blood and storm. The camp emerged from the mist like a dream half-remembered, a clearing ringed by towering pines, their needles whispering secrets to the wind. Fires crackled in shallow pits, casting flickering shadows on tents woven from hides and vines, sturdy against the wild's whims. Figures moved in the half-light, wolves at first, sleek and watchful, their eyes reflecting the flames like embers. But as Elara watched, they shifted, fur receding into skin, paws lengthening to hands, until a dozen men and women stood before her, clad in rough leathers and furs, their faces etched with the same feral grace as Thorn's. Murmurs rippled through them, a low growl of curiosity and wariness. A woman with silver-streaked hair stepped forward, her eyes sharp as flint, cradling a bow that looked carved from ancient bone. "Alpha," she said, nodding to Thorn before her gaze fixed on Elara. "Who is this? The storm's gift?" Thorn set the pups down gently, watching as they scampered to a nest of moss-lined blankets near the central fire, where an elder wolf nuzzled them with a soft whine. "Elara," he replied, his voice carrying the weight of command. She fished them from the whispering river's teeth. Without her, they'd be lost to the depths. The woman's expression softened, just a fraction, as she approached. Up close, Elara saw the lines of hardship on her face, scars from the same battles that marked Thorn. "Then you have our gratitude, Riverkin. I'm Lyra, beta of the Silverfang." She extended a hand, calloused and steady, and Elara took it, feeling the strength there, the unspoken pact. But not all eyes were kind. From the edge of the circle, a burly man with a shaved head and tattoos like twisting vines glared, his fists clenched. "Gratitude? She's village-born, smells of herbs and fear. What if she's a spy for the hunters? The Empire's closing in." "Enough, Gar," Thorn snarled, the sound more beast than man, silencing the camp. The air thickened, charged with his authority, and Gar backed down, though his eyes lingered on Elara like a promise of trouble. She swallowed the knot in her throat, the old isolation creeping back. The village had cast her out for her gifts, calling her a witch for healing what they couldn't understand. Here, among these wild souls, would it be the same? Thorn gestured to a log by the fire, where flames danced hungrily, chasing the damp chill. "Sit! Warm yourself. The night bites deeper than the river." Elara obeyed. the heat a balm on her skin, though her mind raced, as Elara brought her a steaming mug of broth, rich with meat and roots that warmed her from within. Thorn settled across from her, the fire painting his features in gold and shadow. "You risk much for strangers," he said quietly, once the pack had dispersed to their tasks, tending the pups or sharpening blades against the encroaching dark. "Why?" Elara stared into the flames, the memories surfacing unbidden. Her grandmother's hands, gnarled but sure, teaching her to bind wounds with whispers and willow bark. The night the villagers turned, accusing her of cursing the crops when a blight came, driving her from the only home she'd known. "I've known loss," she murmured. "A mother taken by fever, a home burned by suspicion. Those pups, they had no one. I couldn't let the river take that from them, too." His gaze held hers, searching, and for a moment the world narrowed to the crackle of the fire and the unspoken ache between them. "Loss shapes us," he said, his voice low, threaded with a pain she recognized. "My mate. The flood claimed her seasons ago, sweeping our den while I hunted. These pups are the last of her line. I failed them once. I won't again." The confession hung like smoke, raw and unguarded. Elara's heart twisted. Empathy. Yes, but something more. A pull toward this broken king who carried his pack's weight alone. She reached out, hesitating, then placed her hand near his on the log, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth. "You didn't fail. You're here, fighting." A low rumble escaped him, not quite a laugh, as he turned his hand palm up, inviting. Their fingers brushed, and in that touch, a spark ignited, not fire, but something ancient, like roots entwining beneath the earth. The pack watched from afar, Lyra's nod, subtle approval, Gar's scowl deepening. But the night wasn't done with its revelations. As the moon climbed higher, silvering the mist, a distant howl pierced the calm, not the pack's joyful call, but a warning edged with urgency. Thorn tensed, rising like a shadow uncoiling. "Scouts," he growled. "The Empire's riders, too close." Elara stood, her healer's instincts flaring. "I can help. My herbs, no." His hand caught her arm, firm but not bruising, amber eyes fierce. "You stay. For now, you're under my protection." The words wrapped around her like a vow, heavy with destiny's thread. As he strode into the dark, calling his pack to arms, Elara felt the forest close in, the pup's soft breaths a reminder of the fragile line she'd crossed. Alone by the fire, she touched the spot where his fingers had lingered, a quiet ache blooming in her chest. The wild had claimed her, subtly, irrevocably, and in the shadows unseen eyes, perhaps Gar's, perhaps something older, watched, waiting for the storm to break anew. The fire's glow dimmed as the pack melted into the night, their forms blurring between man and beast under the moon's pale scrutiny. Elara sat frozen by the flames, the mug of broth cooling in her hands, its earthy steam curling like ghosts into the mist. The pups had curled into a tight knot at her feet, their breath soft and even now, oblivious to the tension coiling through the camp. But she felt it, the sharp edge of impending violence, humming in the air like the string of a drawn bow. Lyra lingered nearby, sharpening a dagger with rhythmic scrapes that set Elara's teeth on edge. The beta's eyes flicked to her, assessing before she spoke. "The Empire's riders don't come for talk. They've been pushing our borders for months, burning dens, claiming the wild as their civilized ground. Thorn won't let them take more." Elara's pulse quickened, images flashing unbidden. The village's thatched roofs aflame under torchlight, accusations hurled like stones as she fled into exile. "And you fight them every time?" Lyra's lips twisted in a wry half-smile, devoid of humor. "We survived them. The Silver Fang have held these woods since the old kings fell, but numbers, they wear us down." She sheathed the blade and stood, her posture a coiled spring. "Stay here. Tend the young. That's your place for now." But as Lyra vanished into the shadows, Elara couldn't sit idle. The ache in her chest, the same pull that had drawn her to the river, stirred again, insistent, like roots seeking light through stone. She rose, wrapping her cloak tighter against the night's bite, and gathered a satchel of herbs from her belt, feverfew for pain, yarrow to staunch blood. If battle came, she'd not be a burden. Not again. The forest beyond the clearing swallowed sound but not scent, the metallic tang of fear sweat and oiled steel drifting on the breeze. Elara moved quietly, her healer's steps light on the needle-strewn path, guided by the distant clash of metal and guttural snarls. The trees here were ancient sentinels, their bark etched with runes that glowed faintly under moonlight, whispering protections long faded. She paused at a fork, heart hammering, when a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. She twisted, dagger half drawn, but Gar's face loomed in the gloom, his breath hot and ragged. "Foolish girl," he hissed, eyes wild with suspicion. "Run into the fight. You'll get us all killed. Village witch, playing at hero." His grip tightened, bruising, and panic flared in her veins. "Let go," she gasped, when he eased enough for words. "I can help. Wounds." "Help? Like you helped your own kind turn on the wild." No, his voice dripped venom, tattoos shifting like serpents on his arms. "I know your scent. Empire spies whisper of a healer who bends beasts to her will. Thorns blinded by gratitude, but I see you for what you are, a curse waiting to unravel us." Elara shoved against him, her free hand brushing his chest. In that touch a jolt surged through her, not fear, but something deeper. A flicker of vision, Gar as a pup himself, orphaned in a raid, claws raking his hide as he hid in thorns. Pain, raw and echoing her own. She recoiled, the image fading, but it left her shaken. Was this her gift? Not just herbs and whispers, but glimpses into souls. Gar staggered back, surprise cracking his snarl. "What sorcery!" A roar shattered the moment, close now, shaking leaves from the branches. Thorn burst through the underbrush, fur rippling along his arms in partial shift, blood streaking his face from a shallow gash above his eye. Behind him, two packmates dragged a limp rider between them, empire garb torn, insignia of a snarling boar glinting in the low light. "Stand down, Gar!" Thorn commanded, his voice a thunderclap that rooted them both. He stepped between them, amber eyes locking on Elara's with a mix of fury and relief. "I told you to stay!" Gar spat at the ground. "She's meddling, Alpha. Touched me. Saw things. She's no ally." Thorn's gaze sharpened, turning to her. "What did you see?" Elara hesitated, the weight of eyes upon her, pack scouts emerging from the trees, breaths heaving, wounds blooming red. "His pain," she whispered. "A raid. Alone. I don't know how. It's always been there faint, but tonight." The air stilled, the pack murmuring like wind through reeds. Lyra arrived, wiping blood from her blade, her expression unreadable. Thorn's hand found Elara's shoulder steadying, the warmth of his palm chasing the chill. A seer touch, rare. The old blood runs in you, riverkin. Not witchery, but kin to the wild. Gar growled low, but Thorn silenced him with a look. "Bind the rider. We'll question him at dawn." As the pack obeyed, Thorn pulled Elara aside into a hollow, where moonlight pooled like spilled silver. Up close, the gash wept blood, and she pressed a cloth of yarrow to it without thinking, her fingers trembling against his skin. "You risk too much," he murmured, wincing but not pulling away. The touch lingered, electric, stirring that ancient pull between them, a thread of fate woven in storm and shadow. "And you," she replied, voice soft, "refuse to leave anyone behind, even me." His eyes softened, the Alpha's mask cracking to reveal the man beneath, scarred by loss as deeply as his flesh. "The flood took my mate, left me hollow. These woods, They're all I have left to guard, but you bring them back to life. The pups sense it, I do." The confession hung between them, fragile as mist, until a scout's urgent bark pulled him away. But as he went, his fingers grazed hers, a promise unspoken, tender amid the violence. Elara watched him vanish, the forest reclaiming its secrets, but Gar's glare burned from the shadows. A seed of discord sown deep. Dawn crept in reluctant, painting the mist in hues of bruised purple, but the camp stirred with uneasy vigilance. The captured rider stirred in his bonds by the fire, his face gaunt under Empire steel. Elara knelt nearby, binding a scout's gashed leg with strips of cloth and willow bark, the herb's bitter scent grounding her amid the whispers. The pack eyed her differently now, wary respect mingling with curiosity, Lyra's nod a quiet acceptance. Yet as Thorn questioned the rider in low, menacing tones, revealing plans of a larger force marching on their heartlands, Elara felt the noose tighten. Her visions flickered at the edges, flashes of fire-swept ruins, a crown of thorns for the Alpha, and her own hands bloodied, choosing sides in the fray. The wild called her deeper, but the cost loomed, loyalty to these outcasts, or the solitude she'd always known. When Thorn returned, his expression grim, he knelt beside her. "They come for the runestone at the heart of our territory. Without it, our shifts weaken, the pack fades." His hand covered hers, rough and sure. "Will you stand with us, Elara? See what the wild truly needs?" She met his gaze, the amber depths reflecting her own fractured resolve. In that moment, the impossible bloomed. Love's shadow, fierce and unyielding, demanding sacrifice. "I will," she breathed, the words sealing her fate as the first rays pierced the canopy, heralding a dawn of blood and rebirth. But in the underbrush, Gar's eyes narrowed, plotting in silence, the pack's fragile unity fraying at the seams. The sun clawed its way through the canopy, casting fractured beams that danced like mocking fireflies over the camp. Elara's hand still trembled from the night's revelations, the yarrow-stained cloth clutched in her fist as she watched Thorn pace the clearing. The captured rider had spilled his secrets under the Alpha's unyielding stare. Empire forces massing at the Whispering River's fork, 2 days' march away, their iron-shod boots hungry for the runestone that anchored the Silverfang's wild essence. Without it, the pack's shifts would falter, their forms trapped in limbo between man and beast, vulnerable to the hunter's blades. Thorn's jaw tightened, the gash above his eye now crusted over, a dark slash against his sun-kissed skin. He stopped before her, the weight of command etching deeper lines into his face. "The stone's guarded in the Elder Hollow, deep in the Thornwoods. We'll move at dusk, scouts ahead, the rest in formation. Lyra leads the flank." His eyes, those amber depths, softened as they met hers. "You stay with the pups and the wounded. Your sight. It could turn the tide, but not if you're lost to the fray." Elara rose, the forest's damp breath clinging to her skin like a reluctant lover. The pull in her chest ached sharper now, a tether binding her to this man who refused to let the wild claim her solitude. "I'm no fragile village bloom, Thorn. I've bound wounds in blizzards, faced accusations that cut deeper than steel. Let me come. My visions, they're clearer near you, like the river's current aligning." He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, rough yet tender, igniting a warmth that chased the morning chill. The touch lingered, a silent vow amid the pack's watchful eyes, stirring whispers among the shadows. Gar lurked at the edge, his tattooed arms crossed, a storm brewing in his glare. But Thorn ignored him, his voice a low rumble. "Fate weaves cruel threads, Elara. If you fall, the pack loses more than a healer. I lose." He trailed off, the unspoken word hanging like mist. Her. Before she could press, Lyra approached, her silver-streaked hair bound back, a quiver slung over her shoulder. The elders confirm it. The stone hums with unrest, visions of fracture, of blood on ancient roots. She glanced at Elara, respect flickering in her flinty gaze. "If your gift calls you, riverkin, walk with us, but heed the alpha." The day blurred into preparations, blades honed to lethal whispers, pouches filled with dried meat and elixirs that masked scents from Empire hounds. Elara moved among them, her healer's touch easing a scout's fevered brow, murmuring words that soothed both flesh and spirit. The pups tumbled at her feet, their playful nips a balm against the rising dread. Their grey and black forms a reminder of the fragile lives she'd pulled from the depths. One, the smallest storm cloud fur, pressed against her leg, whining softly, as if sensing the fracture ahead. As dusk bled crimson across the sky, the pack shifted, fur rippling over limbs in a symphony of growls and cracks. Thorn's form blurred last, his body elongating into a massive wolf, midnight pelt scarred like his human skin, amber eyes locking on Elara's with a promise, return. She mounted a sturdy mare from the camp's hidden herd, her satchel heavy with herbs and a dagger etched with her grandmother's runes. The forest swallowed them whole, thorns snagging at cloaks like greedy fingers, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and impending rain. The thornwoods were a labyrinth of barbs and illusions, ancient trees twisting into shapes that mocked the eye, faces in the bark, whispers that mimicked lost loved ones. Elara's skin prickled, visions flickering at the edges, Thorn's silhouette against a blaze. Gar's hand raised in betrayal, her own blood mingling with river mud. She rode beside Lyra, the beta's wolf form loping parallel, when the first ambush struck. Arrows whistled from the gloom, Empire scouts melting from the underbrush like wraiths in steel. A packmate yelped, arrow-piercing flank, tumbling into the thorns with a snarl. Chaos erupted, snaps of jaws, clash of fangs on armor, the wet thud of bodies hitting earth. Elara dismounted in a fluid rush, dagger drawn, her mare bolting into the shadows. She dragged the wounded scout free, pressing Comfrey to the wound as blood welled hot. "Breathe," she urged, her voice steady amid the fray. "The wild holds you." Thorn's roar cut through, a beast unchained, barreling into the fray. He tore through two riders, his form a blur of midnight fury, but a third swung a mace that glanced his shoulder, drawing a spray of crimson. Elara's heart seized, the vision crashing full. Him, broken at the stone's base, her hands failing to mend what destiny demanded. She surged forward, thorns raking her arms, ignoring the sting as she reached him. A rider bore down on her, sword raised, his face twisted in zealous hate. "Witch spawn!" But before the blade fell, Gar lunged from the side. Wolf form massive and vengeful, clamping jaws around the man's leg, dragging him screaming into the undergrowth. Gar shifted back, bloodied and heaving, his eyes meeting Elara's with a flicker of something raw, gratitude or calculation. He nodded once, curt, before vanishing into the fight. The skirmish broke as quickly as it came, the survivors fleeing with howls of retreat. The pack regrouped, wounds tallied, 3 down, but the path to the hollow clear. Thorn shifted human again, naked and glistening with sweat and blood, his shoulder torn deep. Elara knelt, tearing her cloak to bind it, her fingers tracing the gash with a healer's precision. Pain etched his features, but he caught her wrist, pulling her close. "You defied me," he murmured, breath ragged against her ear, "and saved me." Their lips met then, fierce and desperate, tasting of salt and storm, a kiss born of survival, laced with the impossible love that bloomed in shadowed woods. The pack averted eyes, giving them this stolen breath, but Gar watched from afar, his scowl deepening into something colder, a fracture widening. Deeper into the thornwoods they pressed, the air growing heavy with the runestone's hum, a vibration that sang in Elara's bones, awakening her blood. Visions sharpened. The stone, a crystal-veined monolith pulsing with ethereal light, guarded by spectral wolves of mist and memory. But Empire torches flickered on the horizon, a tide of steel advancing. Thorn's hand found hers as they crested the final ridge, the hollow unfolding below like a wound in the earth. "There," he whispered, voice thick with destiny's weight. "Our heart." Elara squeezed his fingers. The bond between them, a fragile light against the encroaching dark. Sacrifice loomed, her visions whispering of loss. The stone, or a life, or the solitude she'd clung to. As the first raindrops fell, pattering like tears on leaves, she stepped forward, the wild's call drowning out fear. But in Gar's shadowed gaze, trailing them, betrayal stirred, a thorn ready to pierce the pack's fragile unity. The night deepened, promising blood and rebirth, as the Alpha refused to leave her side. The elder hollow yawned before them like a scar etched into the earth's ancient hide, its rim jagged with thorn vines that twisted upward like pleading claws. Moonlight filtered through the canopy in silver shards, illuminating the monolith at its heart. A towering slab of crystal-veined obsidian, pulsing with an inner glow that hummed through the air like a distant heartbeat. Spectral wolves prowled its base, their forms translucent mist woven with starlight, eyes like frozen flames watching the intruders with silent judgment. The rain had thickened to a steady veil, drumming on leaves and turning the ground to slick clay, where the pack's paws and boots sank with ominous squelches. Thorn's hand tightened around Elara's, his skin fever-hot despite the chill, the bond between them a living thread that thrummed with the stone's rhythm. He shifted partially, fur bristling along his arms, a low growl rumbling from his chest as the spectral guardians stirred, their ethereal forms coiling tighter. "The old watchers," he murmured, voice rough with reverence and warning. "They test blood. Only the true may pass." Elara's visions surged, unbidden and vivid, the stone cracking under empire hammers, Thorn's form unraveling into smoke, her own hands outstretched, grasping at shadows that slipped away. She gasped, the images clawing at her mind, but she stepped forward, the pull in her chest guiding her like a compass forged in storm. The smallest pup's whine echoed in her memory, a fragile anchor amid the chaos. "I'm no threat," she whispered to the guardians, though her voice trembled. "I've come to mend, not break." One spectral wolf, detached from the pack, circling her with a chill that seeped into her bones, its muzzle brushing her cloak. In that touch, a flood of echoes poured through her, centuries of alphas standing vigil, mates lost to floods and foes, the wild's endless cycle of loss and renewal. The guardian paused, nostrils flaring as if scenting her river-soaked soul, then melted back with a soft, approving howl that vibrated the air. The path cleared, the monolith's glow intensifying, casting ethereal patterns on the pack's faces. Lyra shifted fully to wolf form, her silver pelt gleaming as she flanked the group, ears pricked toward the encroaching thunder of hooves beyond the ridge. "They're here!" she snarled through bared fangs, the words half-formed in the pack's shared tongue. Gar hung at the rear, his massive frame tense, eyes darting not to the guardians, but to Thorn's back, a shadow of resentment flickering in their depths. The Empire's vanguard crested the ridge like a tide of iron and fury, torches blazing against the rain, their war cries muffled by the storm. Armored riders on hulking destriers, crossbows leveled, banners snapping with the boar's snarling emblem. At their head rode a captain in blackened plate, his helm crested with thorns, voice booming like cracking stone. "The wild ends here. Yield the stone beasts or we'll raise your dens to ash." Thorn roared in answer, the sound shattering the night, his body exploding into full wolf form. Midnight fur rippling over muscle, scars glowing faintly under the moon. The pack surged with him, a wave of snarls and snapping jaws, crashing into the riders with primal savagery. Fangs tore at horseflesh, claws raked armor, the air filling with the metallic tang of blood and the wet rip of leather. Elara dismounted in the hollow's shelter, her mare whinnying in terror before bolting into the thorns. She pressed against the monolith, its warmth seeping through her cloak like a lover's embrace, visions sharpening to knife-edge clarity. She saw it then, The fracture point, not the stone, but Gar, lunging not at the enemy but at Thorn's exposed flank, betrayal etched in his snarling maw. "No!" she breathed, the word lost to the din. Heart pounding, she drew her dagger, the runes on its blade igniting with a soft blue light. Her grandmother's blood awakening fully now. The gift wasn't just glimpses, it was command, a whisper to the wild that bent beasts to will. The battle spilled into the hollow, riders dismounting to form a phalanx, swords gleaming as they advanced on the stone. A bolt grazed Lyra's shoulder, drawing a yelp, and she tumbled near Elara, shifting human in a haze of pain, blood streaming from the wound. "Hold them!" Elara urged, tearing cloth and pressing it firm, her free hand tracing runes in the air that glowed faintly, staunching the flow with ethereal threads. Lyra's eyes widened, gratitude flashing before she nodded, scrambling back into the fray with renewed ferocity. Thorn barreled through the line, his jaws clamping around a rider's arm, wrenching the man from his feet with a spray of crimson. But the captain wheeled toward him, mace swinging in a deadly arc. Elara's vision screamed, time fracturing, and she acted without thought, her voice rising in a healer's incantation laced with command. "Thorn, to me!" The words carried on the wind, wrapping around him like invisible chains, pulling him aside just as the mace whistled past, embedding in the earth with a thunderous crack. He skidded to her side, shifting human in a blur, chest heaving, eyes wild with battle lust and something deeper, amazement, desire. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead, blood trickling from a fresh gash on his thigh. "Your voice. It calls the pack's soul." He cupped her face, thumb brushing her rain-slicked cheek, the touch igniting that impossible spark amid the carnage. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed, the storm, the screams, the clash of steel fading to the rhythm of their shared breaths. "I see you, Thorn," she whispered, her hands already working, binding his wound with swift, sure motions, herbs crushed into the cloth for strength. "All of you. The loss, the fire. You won't face this alone." His lips found hers again, brief but searing, a vow sealed in blood and rain. "Nor you me, Riverkin. The stone demands a guardian's heart. If it comes to sacrifice—" A guttural snarl cut him off. Gar, half-shifted, barreled through the melee, his eyes locked not on the captain, but on Thorn, claws extended in murderous intent. The betrayal unfolded, as Elara's vision had foretold, Gar's raid-born rage twisting into envy, seeing her as the fracture in his alpha's unyielding solitude. He lunged, but Lyra intercepted, her form slamming into his with a bone-jarring impact, the two tumbling in a frenzy of fangs and fury. The captain seized the distraction, charging the monolith, hammer raised to shatter its heart. Elara broke from Thorn, dagger flashing as she met him, her body moving on instinct born of visions and wild blood. The blade met his armor in a spark of runes, not piercing, but channeling. A jolt that hurled him back, his body convulsing as spectral wolves manifested fully, tearing into the remaining riders with misty vengeance. Thorn roared, pulling her behind the stone as arrows rained, one grazing her arm in a hot line of pain. Gar broke free from Lyra, vanishing into the thorns with a defeated howl, his flight a wound deeper than any blade. The Empire's line shattered, survivors fleeing into the night, but the cost lingered, packmates fallen, the hollow scarred with bloodied earth. As the rain eased to a mournful drizzle, Thorn held Elara close, the monolith's hum steadying, its light weaving around them like protective threads. "You turned the tide," he murmured, voice thick with exhaustion and awe. "But Gar, he'll return with venom." She leaned into him, the pain in her arm a dull throb, her visions quieting to whispers of what lay ahead. A greater force, a choice that would demand everything. The Alpha's refusal to leave her side burned brighter than the stone's glow, a beacon in the gathering dark, even as destiny's thorns tightened their grip. The night whispered of trials yet to come, the wild's heart beating fierce and unyielding. The drizzle lingered like a reluctant ghost, pattering against the leaves as the pack gathered in the hollow's shadowed embrace. The monolith stood sentinel, its crystal veins pulsing with a subdued rhythm, as if nursing the wounds of the night alongside its guardians. Bodies lay scattered, packmates twisted in unnatural angles, their fur matted with mud and crimson. Empire riders crumpled like discarded puppets, armor dented and lifeless. The spectral wolves had faded back into mist, their ethereal howls echoing faintly in the wind, a dirge for the fallen. Elara knelt beside a young scout, her hands steady despite the ache in her grazed arm, crushing goldenrod into a poultice that she pressed against the boy's torn flank. His breaths came shallow, eyes glassy with pain, but he managed a weak whine, shifting partially to nuzzle her wrist. "Easy," she murmured, her voice a soothing thread amid the groans and low growls rippling through the survivors. The wild's blood coursed stronger in her now, visions flickering like embers, flashes of the boy's life, a den warmed by firelight, a mate waiting in vain. She pushed them down, focusing on the mend, the herb's bitter tang grounding her. Thorn moved among them like a storm contained, his form human once more, naked save for a hastily draped cloak, the gash on his thigh bound but weeping. He directed Lyra with terse commands, her silver pelt streaked with blood as she dragged the dead to a pyre at the hollow's edge. "Burn them swift," he growled, his amber eyes haunted, the alpha's mask cracking under grief's weight. Two lost, sisters to the pups, their sense forever woven into the pack's sorrow. He paused by Elara, his hand brushing her shoulder, a touch that lingered too long, heavy with unspoken loss. "You held the line, saved more than the stone tonight." She looked up, rain tracing paths down her face, mingling with the salt of unshed tears. The kiss from the fray burned in her memory, fierce and fleeting, a spark that defied the encroaching dark. But Gar's betrayal clawed at her thoughts, his flight into the thorns, a howl laced with venom that promised return. "And you refused to yield," she replied softly, tying off the bandage, even when the visions screamed of fracture. Her fingers trembled as she rose, the dagger at her belt humming faintly, its runes a reminder of the power she'd unleashed, command over beast and shadow alike. Lyra approached, shifting to human form with a grimace, her shoulder wound hastily wrapped. "The captain's dead. Your spectral kin saw to that." "Jizz." She nodded toward the monolith, respect etching her features. "But scouts report the main force halts at the ridge. They'll regroup by dawn, hammers ready for the stone. And Gar. His scent trails north, toward the Empire outposts. Traitor's path." Thorn's jaw clenched, a low rumble building in his chest. "He was Pack, raised from the same raids that scarred us all." And the words carried the sting of personal betrayal, his gaze drifting to the pyre where flames licked upward, consuming fur and flesh in acrid smoke. The pack gathered closer, their forms a ragged circle, eyes reflecting the fire's glow, wariness, grief, and a flicker of doubt now fixed on Elara. Whispers slithered through them, the river-kin who bent wills, who saw too deep. Was she salvation, or the crack that let the wild bleed out? Elara felt the weight of their stares, the old solitude creeping back like fog over the river. In the village, they'd called her Curse. Here, she glimpsed the same fear in their tightened jaws. But Thorn stepped between her and the circle, his presence a shield, broad shoulders squared against the night. "She is Silverfang now," he declared, voice ringing clear, laced with the Alpha's unyielding command. "Bound by blood and storm. Question her, and you question me." Silence fell, heavy as the rain-soaked earth, broken only by the crackle of the pyre. Lyra inclined her head, the first to yield, though her eyes lingered on Elara with newfound caution. The others followed, murmurs shifting to nods, the pack's fragile unity mending like a wound under her own hands. Yet in the shadows beyond the fire, Elara caught a fleeting shape, a wolf's silhouette watching, then vanishing into the mist. Not Gar, but something older, wilder, the forest's own judgment. As the pack dispersed to tend their hurts and scout the perimeter, Thorn pulled her aside, into an alcove of vine-draped stone, where the monolith's glow cast soft illusions on the walls. The air hummed here, intimate and charged, the stone's warmth chasing the chill from their bones. He cupped her face, thumbs tracing the curve of her cheeks, his touch both fierce and fragile. The visions, they show you lost too, don't they? His voice dropped, raw with the fear he rarely voiced. Me unraveling, you alone by the river once more. Elara leaned into him, her hands splaying across his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heart beneath scarred skin. The pull between them deepened, a lazo spiritual that transcended flesh, destiny's cruel gift, love impossible yet inevitable. They show choices, she whispered, her breath mingling with his. Sacrifice for the pack, for the wild, but not solitude, not if you refuse to leave. His lips claimed hers then, slow and searching, tasting of blood and rain, a kiss that poured out the alpha's guarded heart. It was tenderness amid violence, a moment stolen from the fray, where the world narrowed to the press of bodies and the shared ache of what might be lost. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers, ember eyes burning with resolve. Then we face it together. The stone's power stirs in you, old blood, healer and seer. It demands a price, but I'll pay it before I let the Empire claim you. A distant horn blared from the ridge, Empire signals cutting through the drizzle like a blade, heralding the dawn's approach. Thorn tensed, pulling away, but his hand lingered on hers, fingers entwining in silent vow. Elara's vision stirred again. Flashes of a greater battle, Gar's return with reinforcements, the monolith shattering in a blaze that birthed something new. Pain with purpose, death yielding hope. She squeezed his hand, the bond alight against the gathering storm, even as the pack's howls rose in answer, fierce and unbreaking. The night deepened. The hollow, a cradle of embers and shadows, but the Alpha's refusal anchored her, a force as unyielding as the stone itself. Sacrifice loomed on the horizon, a shadow promising transformation, and in its wake, the wild's true heart, beating, unbroken, entwined. The dawn broke like a wound reopening, crimson light bleeding through the thornwoods to stain the elder hollow in hues of fire and regret. The monolith loomed at the center, its crystal veins throbbing erratically now, as if the stone itself sensed the fracture widening. Empire horns blared from the ridge, a relentless dirge that shook the leaves, summoning the full tide of their forces. Hundreds strong, armored in iron etched with conquest runes, banners whipping in the wind like vengeful serpents. The pack had fortified the hollow as best they could. Barricades of felled thorns, spectral wards woven from Elara's awakened blood, the air humming with fragile magic that tasted of salt and storm. Elara stood beside Thorn, her cloak torn and bloodied from the night's skirmishes, the dagger's runes pulsing faintly against her thigh. The graze on her arm had scabbed into a thin scar, a reminder of the cost already paid. But her visions roared unchecked now, torrents of fire sweeping the hollow, Gar's shadowed form leading the charge, the monolith's light extinguishing in a final shattering pulse. She clutched Thorn's hand, the Alpha's grip ironclad, his midnight fur half shifted along his arms, ready to unleash the beast within. "It's Gar," she whispered, voice raw from the night's cries. "He returns with them. The betrayal, it's the key they need to breach the wards." Thorn's amber eyes darkened, grief and fury twisting his features like roots upheaved. "Then we end it, for the pack, for the wild." His free hand cupped her cheek, thumb tracing the line where rain had carved paths down her face. A touch that held the weight of impossible love, fierce, born in the river's jaws, now tested by destiny's blade. The kiss they shared was brief, a brush of lips tasting of earth and farewell, tenderness amid the gathering thunder. "If the stone falls, promise me you'll run, take the pups, find a new current." "No," she breathed, the word a vow, her healer's heart refusing the solitude that clawed at her edges. The pack gathered behind them, Elara at the flank, her silver form scarred but unbowed. The survivors a ragged line of snarls and steel. The pups huddled in a moss-lined crevice, their whimpers muffled, watched over by an elder whose eyes gleamed with quiet defiance. Elara's blood sang with the wild now, her gifts unfurling like thorns, not just sight but command, a seer's whisper that could bend shadows and beast alike. The Empire surged down the ridge, an avalanche of hooves and howls, Gar at their vanguard, his massive wolf form loping beside the thorn-crested captain's destrier, eyes burning with vengeful fire. He had traded pack for power, his raid-born scars now badges of Empire loyalty, a howl rising that mocked the Silver Fang's chorus. Arrows rained first, whistling through the mist, felling 2 scouts in sprays of red. The pack met them head-on, Thorn's roar igniting the fray, a symphony of claws rending armor, fangs piercing flesh, the wet crunch of bone under paw. Elara wove through the chaos, her dagger flashing as she channeled wards, ethereal threads snapping out to ensnare riders, spectral wolves manifesting in bursts of mist to drag men screaming into the thorns. A blade grazed her side, hot pain blooming, but she pressed on, binding a fallen packmate with yarrow and will, her voice an incantation that knit flesh amid the screams. Thorn fought like thunder incarnate, his form a blur of midnight fury, tearing through the line until he faced Gar across a bloodied clearing. The traitor's jaws snapped, eyes locked in fraternal hate, the air thick with the scent of betrayal. "You were kin!" Thorn snarled, shifting fully, his massive frame dwarfing the underbrush. "Raised from the same ashes!" Gar lunged, a whirlwind of tattooed fury, claws raking Thorn's flank in a gash that wept deep. They tumbled, rolling in the mud, fangs clashing in a frenzy of violence and sorrow. Brothers in blood, now enemies in shadow. Elara's vision peaked then, the climax crashing like the river in flood. The monolith cracking, its light pouring into her, demanding sacrifice. Not Thorn's life, but hers, the old blood, the seer's gift, to seal the stone against the Empire's greed. Pain with purpose, loss revealing the heart beneath. The captain's hammer swung toward the monolith, runes on its head glowing with counter-magic, inches from shattering the crystal heart. Elara broke from the fray, thorns tearing at her legs, blood trailing in her wake. "No!" Her cry was command, the dagger plunging into the earth at the stone's base, her body slamming against it as the hammer descended. Time fractured, visions of solitude, of Pups drowning, of Thorn's empty gaze, all dissolving in a blaze of light. The impact jolted through her, the monolith absorbing the blow, its veins flaring brilliant as her blood mingled with the rain-slicked stone. Agony seared her core, the gift unraveling, glimpses of souls, whispers to beasts, all pouring out in a torrent that wove into the crystal, fortifying it against the dark. She screamed, body arching as the power claimed her, metamorphosis in reverse, the wild's essence stripping her bare, leaving only the healer's quiet strength. Gar's howl peaked in triumph, but Thorn's jaws closed on his throat in a final merciful snap, the traitor's form going limp, eyes dimming in regret's shadow. The Empire faltered, the stone's amplified light, birthing a storm of spectral guardians that swept through their ranks like vengeful winds, scattering riders into the thorns. The captain fell last, hammer slipping from lifeless fingers, his boar banner trampled under paw. Silence descended, broken only by the drizzle's patter and the pack's ragged breaths. Lyra shifted human, kneeling beside the fallen, her face etched with weary hope. Elara slumped against the monolith, its warmth fading to a gentle pulse, her visions gone, silenced, sacrificed. The world sharpened, colors vivid without the veil, the ache in her chest now a scar of purpose, tender but enduring. Thorn shifted back, stumbling to her side, his wounds grievous but his eyes alight with desperate relief. He gathered her into his arms, blood-smeared and trembling, the Alpha's refusal a fortress unbreached. "You gave everything," he murmured, voice cracking, lips pressing to her forehead in a gesture of unbreakable bond. "But you remain, my riverkin, my heart." She leaned into him, fingers tracing the fresh scars on his chest, the pups emerging from hiding to nuzzle her legs, their warmth a rebirth's promise. The hollow stirred, dawn's true light piercing the canopy, gilding the stone in gold, a symbolic renewal, the wild cycle turning from death to fragile hope. Gar's body lay still, a thorn in the earth, but the pack gathered close, their howls rising soft, a chorus of unity forged in loss. In that moment solitude shattered, destiny claimed, the impossible love blooming eternal amid the ruins. Thorn's gaze met hers, silent and profound, a vow etched deeper than any scar. The Alpha would never leave her side, and in the wild's embrace, Elara found her true home. Pain transformed, heart unbroken, the river's whisper now a song of tomorrow.